Introduced in Pokemon Mind, Body, and Soul and the Cariboan region. A brand new Pokemon Fakemon region created by Cariboan region you can find on Instagram, and I've linked their Insta down in the description for you to go and check them out. Now, this region is based on the Caribbean and also based on Mexico. And here are our two protagonists. You can choose either Felix or Flora. Now, this region plans to have over 300 Pokemon in it. So obviously, I'm not going through that many today, so I've just chosen a few of my favorites. Now, let's jump right in and choose our starter Pokemon. Our grass-type starter is called Rapunji, and it looks like a very shy and scared Pokemon. I love that that giant fungus on the end of its tail is kind of shading it and covering its head there, which is really cool. And the coloring in its eyes are really nice. Now, this is based on lizard as well as fungus as well. It evolves into Lizoom, and it still looks very shy and quiet, almost like the leaves on its head are kind of forming a little bit of a hairstyle, which is kind of cute. I still love that giant mushroom underneath the tail is kind of making like a bit of a helmet or kind of like some covering over its head as well. And then lastly, it evolves into Lumiobo, which is now a grass and electric type Pokemon. This Pokemon has a very different vibe now. Although it still kind of has a bit of a shy look in its face, it's now got a big, almost like a wizard hat now. And you can see those electric sparks coming off a lot of its body as well. Now, this is based on the blue whiptail lizard, and that tail is really, really long and curls up at the end there. You can see that blue coming through as well. The fire type starter is called Batot. It's actually a fire and flying type Pokemon. Now, this is based on a bat, but those little flames on the end of its ears are really cool looking, and I love how happy it is. I guess compared to the grass type starter, it's a very different feel. It evolves into Vamchar, which definitely has a bit of an emo look now. It is the gothic Pokemon. You can see that hair covering over half of its face there. But doesn't have those flames on its ears now, but it is holding a flame, which is kind of cool. But that flame coloring in the inside of its ears and the inside of its wings are really nice. I absolutely love its final evolution in Camazerno, though. It's actually now a fire and poison type Pokemon, and this is now based on Camazots. And Camazots is a large bat spirit in Mayan mythology that is associated with death. I love that fiery look across the whole body and the wings there, but even that little skull on its chest is a really cool touch, and those flames coming off the chest as well. And then the water type starter is Sholor, which looks kind of cute. It is based on a lobster. I really like the coloring. I think the light blues with the reds work really nicely. It evolves into Trebster, which now looks a little bit angrier, but those claws are kind of different now. They almost look like big boxing gloves or cannonballs or something. Very round and very circular. And then its final evolution, Cruscoral, is now a water and steel type Pokemon. I think the steel typing works really well here because of that armor plating all across the back and the tail of this Pokemon. The head is actually tiny compared to the rest of the body as well. This is actually a very tough choice. All of these starters are amazing, but I think I'm gonna have to choose the fire type starter. But let me know down in the comments which one you're gonna choose. All right, let's move into Route 1 next. The Route 1 rodent is called Insomso, and it's a pure normal type Pokemon. It has insomnia in the name, but it does look very sleepy and very tired with those big bags under its eyes. It evolves into Snoweety, and this Pokemon is actually based on the Agouti now, which is a very small rodent. It still has that very sleepy look. The Route 1 bird is called Knockik and is a pure flying type Pokemon. This looks adorable. It's like a little corvid, but it has like that skull look over the top of its face and its beak, which looks really interesting, but still looks very happy despite looking like it has a skull on its face. It evolves into Wineth, which is now flying and ghost type Pokemon. This line reminds me a lot of the Corviknight line, but this does look really cool. I love that it's still got that white skull look on the top of its head. And then lastly evolves into Reapjar, which kind of has some ghostly wisps on it now. That sort of, it almost looks like a witch's hat on its head, but kind of looks kind of spectral as well. Now, the name combines both the Reaper, but also the Nightjar as well. And I think the combination works really well for this design. It looks really cool. Next, the Route 1 bug is called Wormfur. It's actually a bug and dragon type Pokemon, which is really interesting for a Route 1 bug. It does look kind of dark, and it has those spikes along its back too. Evolves into Dracosis, obviously that pupa kind of design or the cocoon design that we see for a lot of Route 1 bugs. Still looks kind of spiky and kind of evil or dark in a way. I think it's the eyes. And then lastly, it evolves into Drantis, which is now emerged from the cocoon as looking massive. It is based on a praying mantis, but also combines Drake from Dragon in there as well. I love that it keeps that spiky look, which is now all over its body. And those massive claws that it's got makes it look like it's offensive and defensive at the same time. Then next is Pupil, which is a normal and water type Pokemon, obviously based on a puppy, but it's also based on lifeguards as well. We can see those life preserver rings around all four of its arms there. But I also love the aquatic elements in here. Almost like the eyebrows look like drops of water as well, which is cool. Then it evolves into Galanine, and that life preserver look is continuing over the feet, but also around the neck and the chest as well. It does look very, very happy. Next, Kondaka is an electric and ground type Pokemon. This also looks very cute. I love the massive electric whiskers that it's got. They're very, very long, looking like a lightning bolt. Now, this is based on the Paca, which is a small rodent from Central and South America. This Pokemon is also the Pika clone of the region too. And looking closer, I just noticed the little lightning bolt design on the back of its fur there. And then it evolves into Kanaka, which has now become a lot larger and become bipedal as well. It's interesting, the whiskers have actually got smaller now, but do look a little bit more jagged, and the lightning bolt design is on its knees as well now. Then next we have Exavern, which is a rock and ground type Pokemon, which looks really interesting. It almost looks like it maybe got like a yellow miner's hat on the top of its head, but it's almost got like a full helmet covering the entire head as well, because those eyes are kind of covered in a strange kind of face there. And then evolves into Cavronaut, which is actually based on an astronaut now, which is a very interesting design to have an astronaut, but obviously with rocks as well. Then next we have Grytham, which is a normal and flying type Pokemon. This is a really colorful bird. I do like this a lot. It almost looks like the black markings are kind of like a mask over its head, but it does look very happy. It evolves into Motnome, which has now become a lot bigger. The actual design hasn't changed too much, I feel, from its pre-evolution, but this line is based on the Motmot, which is also very colorful like this Pokemon is as well. Then next we have Lamava, which is a pure fire type Pokemon. Now in the Caribbean, there is a lot of volcanoes. We're going to see a few volcanic Pokemon coming up soon. Now, Lamava is obviously based on a little baby lamb, but instead of having wool all over its body, it's got that massive lava instead. Now, this Pokemon actually has a split evolution. First is Plumeep, which is actually a fire and flying type Pokemon. It's completely built up of plumes of smoke, which we would see from volcanoes. It actually looks really large now because of those plumes of smoke, but it does have a horn on its head too, which is cool. The alternative evolution is Magram, which is a fire and steel type Pokemon. I think this is the one that I prefer. This looks awesome. It's based off a massive ram with really large horns there. It almost got like rocky, maybe volcanic rocks on the feet as well, which is really cool design. Then next we have Sokas, which is a bug and flying type Pokemon. This Pokemon doesn't evolve, but it does have two forms. So first we have the single form, but then if you have a lot of them together, it can create the swarm form. So it's kind of like wishy-washy with its solo form and its school form. Now, this is obviously based on a swarm of locusts, but I love that when you have them all together, it forms into a massive bird that almost looks a lot like a phoenix. The giant eye here forming all those little yellow dots throughout the body is really cool. Then next we have Hauntark, which is a ghost and water type Pokemon. Obviously based on a shark, but he's very ghostly as well. That skeleton look over their head and the fin in the back is really cool. I think the really hollowed look in its eye looks really nice. And then evolves into Celocro, which looks a lot more aggressive now. That massive mouth. Interesting, like the top of the skull forms teeth, but then it has its own regular teeth on the bottom part of the jaw as well. But that massive jaw is just like a tunnel. That looks really large. Hatchik is a normal and flying type Pokemon, which looks really cool how it's still half in the egg, but definitely looks like a baby bird. Completely bald, pretty much, especially over the head. It's got like a solo feather on its head and looks very helpless and very defenseless, I think. This Pokemon actually has a three-way split evolution. All of them evolve into different birds. So the first bird is Makawat, which is electric and flying type Pokemon, and is based on the macaw. It's really interesting how like that black fluffy area around the bottom of the bird is looking like a thundercloud. It's almost like lightning coming off with the end of the tail there, which is really cool. The second option is Boilers, which is a water and flying type Pokemon, obviously based on a goose. Interesting, the sort of water droplets around the neck look quite nice. And almost like a bit of a wave design through its body and its wings there. And then its third potential evolution is Hummingel, which is a fairy and flying type Pokemon. Really nice design here with the coloring. I think the yellows and the pinks work really well together. I think out of the three of these evolutions, I think my favorite is going to have to be Makawat. I think the design is really cool here. Then next is Genkarp, which I think looks adorable. This is a water and grass type Pokemon, obviously based on a manatee. But I love how it's got like some seaweed or some kelp on the top of its head there, but it looks so happy. I think it's adorable. And then it evolves into Manalgi. So now, as well as the manatee, it's also based on algae, and that algae is completely covering the majority of this Pokemon. All down the back, you can see is that algae, as well as the kelp, and even some shells and rocks in there as well. Next is Fawnbell, which is a fairy and fire type Pokemon. This is based on a baby fawn, but I love almost like little fireflies flying between the little horns there, which is really cool. It evolves into Inferses, which now has a bit of like a magic wand or a staff, which is holding at the end there. You can see that the horns, almost looks like one of the horns is broken off and one of them's turned into a staff there. And those little fireflies or little wisps are hanging on the end of the wand there, which is a really cool design. And then lastly evolves into Dotania. So all those elements coming together, which looks really interesting in this final Pokemon here. This Pokemon is also based on Titania, which is the queen of the fairies in Midsummer Night's Dream. It almost looks like the horns have formed like a crown over its head as well. A bit of a different vibe here in Sorcerer, which is a dark and psychic type Pokemon. This also looks mysterious, but definitely looks kind of evil. Those really dark red eyes with that black hair definitely looks kind of evil here. It evolves into Koruja, and it doesn't have legs here. It almost looks like maybe it floats or it levitates off the ground, but it is smiling, it is grinning, but still has a very evil look to it. And then lastly, it evolves into Wiccabae. So this Pokemon line is based on a witch, but also on Starbabe, which is a female demon in Mayan mythology. So definitely looking very evil and also very spiky as well. Those red spikes coming through the top of its head. The whole design looks very creepy, but very interesting as well. I really like it a lot. Then next is Chiati, which is a fighting and psychic type Pokemon. This Pokemon doesn't evolve. It is based on the Coati, which I think we can see in the large tail that it's got there, but it's also combining Tai Chi as well, which we can definitely tell in the posture that it's holding. Then next we have Folsma, which is a pure ghost type Pokemon. And this is just like a little spectral ghost, but it has a 3-way split evolution. The first evolution is Juanende, which is a ghost and grass type Pokemon. This looks really cool. I like it's got like a big grassy beard, almost like a grassy hill on its back. Now this is based on Tata Juende, which is a supernatural forest spirit. But I think all the greens coming together look really interesting. And I love that the feet, they're actually pointing backwards to the way the rest of the body is facing, which is really interesting. An alternative evolution is Muensis, which is a ghost and fairy type Pokemon. And this is now based on the Day of the Dead. We can definitely see that in that colorful sugar skull look on the face there. But the massive colorful hat and the really large dress as well all comes together to fit that design of the Day of the Dead really, really well. And then the third potential evolution is Waisuyan, which is a ghost and fire type Pokemon. Now this is based on Sokoyan, which is a spirit who portrays an old woman, but then at night can turn into a fireball and sucks other people's blood. So obviously focusing on the fireball element of that here. Chandler is a pure electric type Pokemon, and I love how bright the eyes and the nose and the horn are here. It really stands out, almost like a firefly. But this is actually based on the Wendigo, and we're definitely going to see that as it evolves, it becomes a lot creepier. But the big blue starry look in its eye, I think the whole Pokemon looks really, really interesting. We can definitely see the Wendigo inspiration here when it evolves into Wengiga. That sort of bright electrical yellow look has moved, and it's now in the tips of the antlers, but also on the arms and the feet as well. Those antlers definitely look like lightning bolts, which is really cool. Crocodile is a fire and rock type Pokemon, obviously based on a crocodile, but it's combining coal as well. We can see it doesn't look too fiery at the moment, but almost underneath that armor plating, I think we can see a bit of heat coming from this Pokemon. That look definitely continues when it evolves into Magmadile. Now the whole body is red. We can almost see little plumes of smoke coming from the top of the head there as well, almost like from a vent. Then next we have Flobara, which is a fighting and water type Pokemon. Now this is based on the Capybara. This definitely looks like a fighting type Pokemon. Almost got like the headband look kind of around the face there. It almost looks like it's jumping in the air as well, which is really cool. And then evolves into Capybrawler, so it's now become much bigger. I think those arms and especially those hands are really large now, definitely for grappling. Doesn't really look like a water type, but if you know about capybaras, they do spend a lot of time in water, so it does make sense that it's a water type here. Then next we have Matoink, which is a ground and steel type Pokemon. While it does look like a baby wild boar at the moment, we can see it's got little, almost like metallic gemstones or metallic elements on the chest and also little tiny tusks as well. But also the snout and the ears are very silvery and very metallic-y, as well as the hoofs as well. The metallic elements are definitely getting larger now when it evolves into Pizink. Those tusks are getting larger, but also like a spiky collar around the neck and I guess the chest of the body as well. I absolutely love its final evolution in Borka. Those steel-tipped tusks and that crest around its chest has become to make almost like massive spikes around the shoulders there, and that just looks amazing. I think it looks like such a dangerous and offensive Pokemon. Wild boars are known for their charging, and if this thing charged at you, I think you're in a lot of trouble. So I think this looks awesome, looks very, very menacing. Even like those red eyebrows, just give it another look. I think this looks amazing. We couldn't have a Mexican-based region without a Chupacabra-based Pokemon. I think this has a really interesting take on a Chupacabra Pokemon as well. This is a Vucabra, which is a dark and fairy type Pokemon. While Chupacabras can be very horrifying and very scary, I think those red hollow eyes are really mysterious and add a really interesting look to it, as well as the coloring as well. Then next we have Vulev, which is a poison and ghost type Pokemon, and this combines a snake but with voodoo as well. I think the voodoo mask over its eyes is really cool, but kind of that spectral purpley flame on the tail and the top of the head there is really nice as well. And then evolves into Hexper, so it has like a voodoo hex in its name. We can see that purpley flame on the tail has become much, much larger now, and the same as the one on the head has become much larger. But I love that skull look over the top of its head as well. Then next we have Basilisk, which is a dragon and fighting type Pokemon. Now this is based on a Basilisk, but also on Aztec warriors as well. I think the colored feathered look across the face there is really reminiscent of that and works really well here. It evolves into Bassawar, so it's now become much larger. Those feathers have become really huge now, and we can see it's got those big claws, almost like armor plating on the knees and the waist and the shoulders and the neck, to have a really cool draconic Aztec warrior vibe here. Then next we have Lagarunk, which is a normal and poison type Pokemon. Now this is based on the Mexican bearded lizard, and we can see that bearded look over the head and the tail as well here. But this Pokemon does look very poisonous with that purple coloring. Almost looks like the tail and the feet have been dipped in poison here. I love the final evolution here though, Slime. We can see it's become a very toxic, slimy, oozy look here. Those beads are all over the head and the back now, but I think just the black and white coloring with the purple as well works really well. It looks really nice. Then next we have Malay, which is a psychic and ground type Pokemon. Now this Pokemon doesn't evolve, but it does have two forms. Obviously it's based on a massive Mayan mask. Very, very colorful here and fits the design really nice. I like the leaves on the chin there as well. So this is the defensive form, which is kind of shut off like a shield. But then we have its offensive form, and the mask is just a small portion of the Pokemon now. It's now become much, much larger with a whole spectral form. Then next we have Seetal, which is a pure water type Pokemon, obviously based on a sea turtle. It looks kind of sad, which is a bit of a shame because I do really like my turtle Pokemon. But the coloring for the shell is really interesting with the whites and the blacks there. And then changes a lot when it evolves into Turbigui, which is now a water and dragon type Pokemon. Now this has two main Chinese inspirations. The first one is a Longui, which is a dragon turtle. And the other is Bixi, which is from Chinese mythology. And Bixi is one of the 9 sons of the Dragon King, and he's depicted as a dragon with a giant turtle-like shell. So we can definitely see those designs coming in here. I love that the shell is really spiky, but also the dragon is really aggressive as well with those claws sticking out. I wouldn't be surprised if this was almost like the Magikarp and the Gyarados of the region, because the turtle is very shy and small and weak, and now its evolution is massive and very, very dangerous and very, very strong. Then next is Lipsy, which is a grass and psychic type Pokemon. This is based on a little iguana. It looks so happy. I love it, but almost has like little flower buds along the tail there, which is a really cool look. It evolves into Iguodelic, and we can see those flower buds have opened up to make flowers all along the tail there, which look really, really nice. As well as an iguana, it also has Psychedelic in its name, which I think gives it its psychic typing. Then next we have Prancham, which is a normal and dark type Pokemon. And this is based on a capuchin monkey, but it does look very, very cheeky. I think it's that massive smile that it has. Definitely looks like it's a little naughty Pokemon. And then evolves into Howlers, which is a very different kind of design. It doesn't look cheeky anymore. This is based on a howler monkey, but also looks very aggressive and kind of creepy in a way as well. I think it's that expression that's got like the howler monkey, but also like the coloring in the eyes. That yellow is very stark compared to the dark reds and the dark colors of the rest of the body there. Next, I absolutely love the design for this Pokemon. I think it's super interesting. This is called Dagepi. So it's based on the guppy fish. It's also got that obsidian weaponry inspiration for the tail and the spike on its head as well. Obsidian weaponry being extremely sharp. That kind of like Aztec coloring and shaping look around the eyes and the head and the tail as well look really, really nice. I absolutely love its evolution in Zyfuitl though. This combines two really interesting things. So firstly, we've got our swordfish, but instead of having that sword on the end of its nose, it's got a Makuhuitl, which is a really dangerous Aztec weapon, which has obsidian spikes all across the end of it there. We can also see that obsidian look on the dorsal fin and on the flippers and on the tail as well. I did say earlier there's a lot of volcanoes in the Caribbean, so we have another volcano here as well. We have Krakub, which is a fire and ground type Pokemon, obviously combining the volcanoes, but with a bear cub as well. That magma spewing off the end of the volcano on the top of its head looks really, really nice, but the poor Pokemon, it doesn't have any eyes. It's just completely covered with that flowing magma. It evolves into Volcare, so now at least the Pokemon can see because we have its eyes. That volcano has moved from the top of its head now down to its back, and it's become quadrupedal as well. Then next we're going into the fossil Pokemon for the region. There are 4 fossil Pokemon. The first one is Masoth, which is a rock and grass type Pokemon. Now this is based on Acrotochrus, which was a giant sloth from the Caribbeans, which has now become extinct. But we can also see that that's combined with a mossy look, so we've got that green moss all over its body. And in current times, moss can grow on sloths because they move so slowly. So I love that they've combined those designs here. And this was revived from the sharp fossils we can see from those claws there. It then evolves into Acrotochrus, which has now become massive, like what the Acrotochnus was like. That massive sloth, that fur has completely covered its eyes, but it does have a big leaf design on its chest and stomach, which is really cool. But we can see those claws are very, very rocky, so the rock and the grass type is very prevalent in this design here. The next fossil is the Fang fossil, and that can be revived into Kitlet, which is a rock and electric type Pokemon. Obviously based on a little saber-toothed tiger, but we can see those long whiskers like what we saw in an earlier Pokemon. How it has like one long whisker, which is yellow and like a lightning bolt shape. But I love that the saber teeth are really bright, almost like they're charged with electricity here. It evolves into Saberino, which has now become much more aggressive. It's got that full saber-toothed cat design. It's on all fours. The claws and the fangs are very electrical. We can see the fangs are lightning bolt shaped as well, which is awesome. The beak fossil can be revived into Walloon, which is a rock and ghost type Pokemon. It is based on Titanus, which is a large, flightless, extinct bird and looks very aggressive, kind of like we can see here in Walloon as well. It does look very aggressive, but I love that the beak is very, very rocky here. And then evolves into Scalanus, so we can see massive now, like the Titanus was like. But I love how the rocky beak almost looks like a bit of an axe shape as well. Got like a rocky necklace around its neck, but it's also standing on a skull as well, which I think works really well with its name, but just makes it look very, very deadly, I think. And then the final fossil is the Horn fossil, and that can be revived into Chromino, which is a rock and steel type Pokemon. Now, this is based on the extinct woolly rhino, and this Pokemon doesn't evolve, but just on its own, it looks really massive and looks really dangerous. We can see the rocky armor kind of look on the back and the shoulders and like the knees of this Pokemon, but that horn is really long and looks very metallic as well. Then next we have Lizop, which is a flying and dragon type Pokemon. Now, this is based on the Draco lizard, which is a lizard that can glide from tree to tree, and we can see this Pokemon here is gliding as well. I love that it's got like goggles over its eyes and its tongue is sticking out like it's concentrating. It's really working on trying to glide, which I think looks really cute. It evolves into Jumeko, so now it looks like it is very adept at flying and at gliding. Still got those goggles and that tongue sticking out, which looks really cool. Then next we have Strowlus, which is a pure flying type Pokemon. Now this is based on the Blue Gorkus. I think in the body shape we can definitely see the Blue Gorkus there, but it's also based on Cumulus Nimbus clouds as well. That cloudy look over the flippers of this Pokemon on the back and the head as well. I love its evolution at Laticus though. It reminds me a lot of Lapras, and this is known as the Transport Pokemon, but different to Lapras because that's a water type Pokemon. This is a transport through the air. So now not so much on the Blue Gorkus, this is now inspired by the Plesiosaur. Almost like the night sky look in the end of its flippers, and the tail and the horns on its head as well are really nice. I like that starry look. Next is Gravity, which is a poison and flying type Pokemon. Now this is based on a baby vulture, and we'll see the vulture design being very apparent in its evolution. But I love that. It's almost like a bit of a mask, but it's poison around those yellow eyes, which definitely give it a bit of a creepy look. Like a little fluffy chick is really cute, but those eyes are very creepy. That creepy look is tenfold when it evolves into Voltime. I absolutely love this design. I think the skull over the head and the beak and that crazy look in the eyes works perfectly. And because those feathers are so like bushy and large as well, looks like it's just covered in thick poisonous slime, and I think the whole design works really well. Then Verthwhip is a normal and fighting type Pokemon. This is based on the Anteater. I think in the shape of their head and the tongue coming out, obviously based on an Anteater, but it does look kind of aggressive. I think it's that fighting typing. It looks like it's in a fighting stance, and the eye does make it look like it's aggressive and it's ready for a fight. But then it evolves into Anlash, which is a very distinguished fighter, but actually uses that really long tail as a whip in battles as well, not just for eating. But it's really sharp. Those claws are really sharp. It looks like it has a lot of different kinds of weapons that you probably wouldn't expect, especially that tongue whip. Now, as you can see, Anlash is number 275 in the dex. There are so many Pokemon in this dex that I just haven't had the chance to show you in this short video here, but make sure you go check out Caribon region on Instagram. Linked in the description to check out the rest of this dex. So if you want to see a part 2 video, let me know down in the comments, but in the meantime, why not check out some of these Fakemon regions as well. Thanks guys, and I'll see you in the next one.